Hello there, I'm Scontulus, and this is TEPPEN Deck Teck, where I present to you decks that are fun, strong, or interesting. Man, it feels good to say that again. Today we are playing Old School Raging Demon. Old school like the very first set of cards ever released for Akuma, the Force Seekers. These old cards enable a slower playstyle that outgrinds any opposition while building a bigger and bigger lead. But they are slow, like Mr. X the Tyrant slow. We aim to modernize this into something more proactive, with big momentum for comebacks. First, let's talk the most iconic RD card, Alexia Ashford. With her single demonic nip, she destroys anything that matters on a stacked 3/8 body, but she's not quite the queen of value she used to be. There's hella 1 MP tokens this season, so she whiffs all the time, and there's no 6 MP or higher units in the meta for her classic 2-for-1 Raging Demon either. Basically, you take constant 50/50s. So she's a little flawed now, but the ceiling is still there. And so we must make her stronger, better, faster, and harder. And to do that, we will make her a Mega Man fan. New headgear discounts every Ascend in hand by 2 or 4, once again making Alexia just about as OP as ever. This much momentum very much incentivizes playing as many Ascends as we can justify. There's also a condition of ascending 3 times, so to make new headgear happen, we need some proactive plays. Cards that are always good and threatening, like Hideo Kojima. What an absolute nerd, but with unmatched power, just like the real Kojima. Oft called fate-defying Ryu, but less cool. This is the card that makes people surrender if they can't out it. Set these up fast and early. Fong is also ideal in an empty board. I always try to set these two up in an empty lane so that they force bad blocks from the opponent. He makes the deck more fun and well-rounded, while our remaining Ascends make us stronger. Security Ball is our fastest Ascend to kill things, and Flight makes it great Ascend fodder as well. And Gang Member is pretty much just like Security Ball, what with the minus MP and the Ascend foddering. Next, our two best Raging Demon users are Rudra and Shadow in the City JP. Both of these target a unit not in front of them, meaning there's no 50/50 to worry about ever when you use Raging Demon. Rudra does 5 damage and has a great 4/9 stat line, while JP destroys anything and becomes 3 of himself plus passive damage. If you've faced down JP clearing your board, you know how hard it can be to come back from. But do not over-focus on summoning 3 JP every time. This card is too versatile and clutch to tunnel vision just the one effect. And that brings us to the boring stuff, the Ascend fodder. These cards actually go balls to the wall. Literally, I think. Too Much to Handle summons 2 balls, and Anglurge also summons 2 balls while being a thick fish. You really need to mulligan for these 2 cards aggressively. But if you get just 1, especially of the action, you're set for the whole game. Lastly, we have the badass cards. Hell yeah! I mean, look at this freaking Even the effect is cool and simple and fun and versatile. A 10 out of 10 card, which helps us to do everything else we want to do at a game-winning pace. Most amazingly, we can finally use Merciless Destroyer Vile to end games the way he never could before. He got a minor buff of +1/+2, and we're trying really hard to force it. So believe me when I say this card is really good now. Here's the deck QR for you, and with all that said, let's get into it. Game 1. I want to show off black in this video, so we are taking on the Black Mirror in the first match. Our opponent on the other Killer Ball variant, you can tell just from their hero art, there's really nothing else they could be on. So this one is going to come down to who has the better blockers in the late game. We'll start things off with Too Much to Handle, and our opponent will start things off with a Killer Fish thing and an Anglurgy. Our first killer ball will die, but we will ascend over our other one with Hideo Shimizu clearing their killer ball, and our opponent unfortunately has the easy answer to Hideo, stopping us from getting the early pressure we wanted. We will go for a too much to handle of our own and get one of our first ascends in there to try and build up for new headgear, and we will use gang member to clear their field while we can, while they are down to just 2. Our opponent will go for betrayal, but unfortunately for them, we still have a Hideo in hand. That does severely hamper our ability to get ahead, though. Our opponent has Alfred Ashcorp, which unfortunately does counter whatever we go for next, so we will go for a destroy right now while it is less detrimental to us. Our opponent will go for a destroy on our gang member, and they will go for another too much to handle, and we will go for our first Raging Demon of the game, going for the guaranteed destroy, trying to get ahead while we can, but unfortunately, getting any hit in against this deck is unlikely. They are prepared to take every block they can, and by responding, we let them go for their last too much to handle of the game. I think it's the last one. We will go for an ascend to pop one of their balls, and we will play down Anglers to try and control the pace of the game, but unfortunately for us, they have their hero art ready, and that does put us down a killer ball. But thankfully, we have plenty of momentum at this point and are able to go for our Hideo in hand that was not banished by their betrayal. Much to their surprise, I can only assume. Unfortunately, they're able to control the board just fine. We go for a gang member in the top lane, bringing back the best target for it. And our opponent has the board wipe. Thankfully, we have the one card that mitigates a board wipe slightly, getting us back 2 MP, and at this point, it feels like our opponent might have a real good chance of winning with their late game strategy online, so we will go for a desperate, merciless destroyer vial. Our opponent will go for too much to handle, and we will respond with new headgear. Our opponent gets 2 balls to block, and they have their hero art online to destroy our vial. We have to really put on the pressure at this point to find the damage before our opponent gets their win conditions, so we will go for our second hero art of the game, destroying their killer balls, and at this point our opponent is not able to find anything efficient. They go for cruel game, but unfortunately for them, that does still spawn 2 killer balls. We will play down a security ball to really seal it, and our opponent has no choice but to surrender game 1. Game 2. We are up against Red's most popular hero this season, so it's one that you gotta be able to fight. And it's also one that plays a similarly mid-rangey, flashy type of game, so it should make for some good back-and-forth TEPPEN. Our opponent starts off with Ted and Snowflake, the opener they always seem to find, exploring for Cheer, which gives every unit in their hand +1/+2. They then will play down Bosch, which is now in actual threat, and they will activate the Violent Tremor that they didn't need to. They would have traded out, so that was a somewhat questionable play. We'll play down another Anglerge, lowering their Bosch's attack, and we will ascend a Fong over our Killer Ball. Our opponent will go for a Rush Rotor, and they will play their Killer Ball down in the top lane, getting a bit of damage in. We get much more damage in, and our opponent will play down their DJ, which will discount and buff their entire hand. We will try to destroy it with Alexia, but this is exactly what I warned about. She whiffs all the time. But now we can go for new headgear, and we will also ascend for Gang Member to get a Fong back from the graveyard. Our opponent will play down their 10 Snowflake and go for No Music, No Life, and we will go for another new headgear, discounting our hand down to 1 and 2 MP. Our opponent will play down a heavily buffed Bosch, and they will clear our board except for Fong and the 2 killer balls. We will ascend for Rudra, doing the damage to Bosch that we need to do to set up for a perfect 2-for-1 with Raging Demon. Our opponent will then go for Blazing Fist of Fury, but we can summon a killer ball to mitigate it and cause it to not kill either of our Rudras, getting in 8 damage. We will ascend for another Fong, just playing into his tankiness, and our opponent has an easy answer to Fong in the form of Jake Paul? I don't remember his name. Similar to Jake Paul, in my opinion. Our opponent will play down a Rush Rotor, and Luke, we will use our killer ball, security ball, to destroy him, guaranteed, not going for any sort of 2-for-1. We really need to not lose the advantage here. Our opponent will go for a desperate Rising Tremors to stop us from getting the damage in, but unfortunately for them, we do still have copies of Too Much to Handle. We will play down a File in the top lane, trying to go for lethal pressure, but our opponent has an excellent answer. Thankfully for us, though, we have an even better answer, finally able to show off why the card is strong. Our opponent will go for a Ken, just trading out, and they are not going to be able to get in any any of his buffs or anything. And our opponent will go for a Violent Tremor, Unfortunately for them, we have the game-winning Mastery of Hado, which will get us the momentum needed to go for another new headgear, as well as the Too Much to Handle in hand. Our opponent will go for DJ, and we will go for our big game-winning swing. Our opponent will go for another cheer, but while you're behind, that is a much worse card. Our opponent is gonna lose their DJ, and they will go for a Rashid, going for their antibody, and detonating our 1 unit on board. We will cycle our next new headgear, getting about like minus 7 MP, and we will go for JP, clearing their board, getting a full field, and there is no way for them to block every lane. We take game 2. Game 3. We are up against Morrigan, Shadowblade, Life Gain. And for those who don't know, this is my least favorite deck that we're fighting. The jury, aggro, combo, life gain thing is so frustrating. But thankfully we have a pretty good matchup, so we are going to show exactly that off. We will start things off with Too Much to Handle, and our opponent will go for Maya Fey, and before they can make her into a 3/7, we will go for Security Ball to defeat her. We get in 2 damage, and our opponent will go for a Jury in the bottom lane, clearly not finding the exact Jury that they're looking for. So they will return it to the deck, getting a refund on their MP, and they will go for Jury in the top lane, the exact one that I was just complaining about. But thankfully we have Shadow in the city, JP ready to go for a guaranteed destroy on her. It's a bit expensive, but it could not be more worth it. And from here, our opponent will go for a Rose to try and stop our Hideo Kojima, and thankfully because of their Roy Bromwell on field, they are able to heal their Rose, and that plus Shadowblade will be able to trade out. Our opponent will go for a bounce, bouncing our Killer Ball, which is never something you want. Just playing it down is already plenty of value at 1 MP. And at this point, we are able to go for a perfect Rudra, getting a big destroy and 5 damage to the other lane. We will go for Hideo Kojima again in the bottom lane, and our opponent will bounce him, but bouncing them into our new headgear gives us unprecedented value. Pretty much game-winning value, as long as we don't fumble it, which is completely realistic. We'll go for a Too Much to Handle to maintain the pressure. We have Rudra, and our opponent will bounce the Rudra and then go for their 3/7 Mia, but we are able to destroy her with a very cheap Alexia Ashford. We get in a big hit, and our opponent still doesn't have anything for us. We play down Anglurge in the top lane, and we will go for Mastery of Hado while our opponent charges for a big combo. They go for a something and a Jury to clear our field, and we will go for an Anglurge in the bottom lane. I think they got the early play effect on Rose, which could be more than enough to turn the game around on its own. Just being behind here, we're really looking for answers, and we are forced to go for an for a 50-50. We are very lucky that it goes through, and with our cheap units, we will play down a couple security balls in the top lane to try and put more pressure on. This is really the point where we could lose the game. Our opponent will go for a Roy and the Scientist Man, a second Roy, and they are healing back. They are getting plenty of pressure on board, and we cannot afford to take any hits at all at this point. Our opponent will go for a big damage action, which opens us up. Thankfully, we have just enough MP and hero art to get in there, and we are able to go for Hideo Kojima for the last time, and our opponent is not able to stop him before he gets in lethal, just barely taking us the dub. I can do that a little better. We're gonna do it one more time against an even higher ranked opponent on the very same deck I don't like. But we are ready. We're gonna start off with an Anglurge to stop their early play Rose from getting her value. Our opponent is already behind at this point, with us getting 2 killer balls to the field, them getting nothing, and they will go for a Leviathan in the top lane, but we are overly prepared. We have Alexia at the ready to keep them behind. Our opponent now has to start cycling to try and find their combo pieces, and returning Killer Ball, like we've established, is really bad. I will play this card at 1 MP every day of the week, and we will do just that. We will get in a bit of early damage, and our opponent has nothing yet. They are forced to take more damage, and they will go for Young Again challenge, bouncing Killer Ball again. We'll just play it right down again, and our opponent is going minus every time they do that. They'll go for Nathaniel Bard into Jury, getting a +1/+1 and +1 MP. They'll do the same with their hero art and attempt to loop even more life gain, but we are able to respond with new headgear, getting us the 1 MP destroy for their Jury. Unfortunately, they have the other Jury to counter our 4/9 unit, but we are ready with answers. We have Anglurge to drop down and trade her out, but our opponent is going to return them to the deck and get a refund on their MP. We try to stop them from doing that. It's a very strong play, but they are able to negate it. At this point, we'll go for gang member to stop their next attempt at getting back in the match. And we are so far ahead. They will go for their last jury, going for Shadow Blade, and we still have the answers. At this point, our opponent will play down Mia Fey, effectively surrendering for game 4. Here we are again, and Akuma is back, basically, but he's playing really fair. The deck kinda has to win by huge outplays and crushing combo players. So unless you're out here to try way harder than your opponent, I only recommend the deck to dedicated Akumers. And anybody who's been missing this classic style, there was no way I was gonna miss the opportunity to play with Mastery of Hado again. These cards are too cool and fun. I really do recommend them. Unless you're going for top rank like I am this season. This deck is not gonna get you to top 100, but it can easily get you to champ. Very, very easily, this can get you champion rank and up to at least 1800, I think. The big thing holding this deck back is that it's too slow, so it can't beat decks that are aggro like Lock or decks that scale like Yawn. As far as matchups go, green is a struggle to beat. That's why I didn't show green. But purple, we can kind of crush that because they're usually combo players. As long as we can beat their first early Leviathan or Rose, you should be in the clear against purple. Red is either going to be back and forth all the way against Antibody, or it's going to come down to who clears the board better against Growth or Ascend. I do also have a budget version here for you, of course, and what do you know, it's the same version, but just don't play Wrestler versus Manager, just play Prayer Slips. Because anything from Limited is already a quarter off. You should be able to afford those for budget. I'll have a real budget version in the next video I do. As for the next episode, I definitely want to start doing these once in a while, rather than never and only streaming, so I'll try to have one up at some point for the next new set. It's clearly going to be an Ace Attorney set, you guys. Ace Attorney is returning to TEPPEN with Evidence, so if you're hyped for Evidence, keep an eye out for the next TEPPEN deck, which will be some sort of Evidence deck, I hope. Let me know down below how you guys liked the first episode in a while. Thank you guys for watching, and please like the video if you liked the video, subscribe if you subscribed. Once again, I'm Sconchulous, and I'll see you in the next one.